to have marijuana illegal. So that's our second one. Our third one is the fireworks ban. Iowa has one of the most restrictive fireworks bans of any state. Since the 1930s, Iowa citizens have been prohibited from using anything except sparklers and snakes. And most of our surrounding states, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, and Illinois, have far less restrictive fireworks laws than we do. Now, I got my hat on here, and I want you to think about what do you think the Founding Fathers would have said if they heard about the fireworks ban? Would they have said, you know, when we put that stuff in the Constitution about how we wanted to secure the blessings of liberty for our posterity, we had no idea you were going to do crazy stuff like light a firecracker in your backyard on the 4th of July to celebrate living in the land of the free. No, you got to make that illegal. Okay, I don't think they would have said that. I think they would have been appalled that citizens don't have that freedom. You know, when I was growing up in Kansas, which allows fireworks, one of my favorite holidays was the 4th of July, precisely because it's fun to set off firecrackers and bottle rockets when you're a little kid. And it's really sad for me every time the 4th of July rolls around in Iowa that the kids of Iowa do not have that opportunity. The point of your life, according to libertarians, but according to anybody, I think, is to be as happy as possible, not to be as safe as possible. Yes, safety is in fact a part of happiness, but when you're reducing the amount of happiness in your life in order to make remote dangers more and more remote, that's a very, very bad trade-off. And so the fireworks ban, we've chosen that because it's symbolic of a lot of laws that are out there meant to protect individual citizens from themselves, essentially. And that's the sort of thing in a free society that shouldn't be permitted. Okay, so those are the three basic issues that we're going to address during the campaign. Well, now let's see what kind of impact we're going to have on the campaign. Virtually every reporter, when they talk to me, says the first thing is, well, you can't win this election. And if I had a dime for every person who told me that I can't win this election, well, I'd have about 17 dimes, I think. So, I don't intend to win the election. And the reason is, you've got to see what we're up against here. The Republican and Democrat in this election are likely to spend $5 million apiece on the election. We aren't going to be able to spend anywhere near that amount. We're going to be very, very lucky if we can raise $20,000 during the course of the election. But here's what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is get 2% of the vote in the election. The reason why it's important for us to get 2% is that under Iowa law, the people who are at the top of the ticket, and that's the presidential candidate in presidential election years, and that's the governor candidate in non-presidential election years like 2010. If the party's candidate at the top of the ticket can get to 2%, what it means is that under Iowa law, their party becomes a major party. So the Libertarian Party would get major party status. And that would change everything for us. We would now be able to run candidates without petitioning, allowing us to run a lot more candidates in the elections. Now, what does that matter? Well, here is why it matters. Third parties in the United States have not been successful by winning elections. Third parties have been successful by drawing enough support away from the major parties that the major parties start adopting their issues. And the two examples I'm going to give are the populists in the 1890s and the socialists in the 19-teens. The populists in the 1890s wanted two things. They wanted direct election of senators by the people instead of by the legislators. And they got a constitutional amendment for that. They wanted a graduated federal income tax, and they got a constitutional amendment for that. And they won almost no elections whatsoever. The socialists in the 19-teens wanted government-provided unemployment insurance. They wanted a 40-hour work week. They wanted no child labor laws. They wanted child labor laws preventing children from working. And they wanted the federal departments of education and labor. Again, they didn't win a lot of elections, but they were very successful at getting their policy goals implemented. Now, how were they able to do that? The way they were able to do that was they were able to attract a core constituency of about 10% of the voters that would vote for them in every election. If you can do that, that's enough that it would decide the election between the Republican and Democrat, meaning the Republican and Democrat are going to be tempted to start stealing our issues in order to get our voters. By that process, we can actually get all of our issues implemented, but without actually winning elections. So that's our goal here, is first get the 2% in this election. Secondly, to open the door then for more Libertarian candidates who put more and more pressure on the major parties. The times in American history when third parties have been successful have been times where there's a significant constituency that's not being served. And we think this is one of those times. What you have to offer voters in the voting booth is essentially the gas pedal or the brakes. In this election, do you want the gas pedal? Do you want the government to get bigger? Or do you want the brakes? Do you want the government to get smaller? And right now, our car has 2 gas pedals and no brakes, because whoever's been in charge, the Republicans or the Democrats, as you've seen with the last 2 presidents, the government's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. There is no option in the voting booth right now for people who want a smaller government, and I am trying to provide that option. The absolute only reason anybody should vote for me is that you want the government to be small. Like I said, I'm not going to win, but what I am offering you is a path by which the government might eventually become smaller. All right, last thing I want to say before I open it up for questions is, I want to talk about the vision that we have for Iowa and try because I think it's an inspiring vision. A lot of times on the campaign trail, what I'll get in the past has been reporters asking me, look, young people are leaving Iowa in droves, our population's declining and getting older. What can we do to attract people to Iowa? And here's what I tell them. I tell them, you know, once upon a time, our state had the best immigration campaign in the history of the world. It was a word-of-mouth campaign that took place about 1850, 1860 in the beer halls of Bavaria and Munich. And the word-of-mouth campaign went like this. Have you heard about Iowa? It's in America. They don't care where you're from. They don't care what language you speak. You get to keep 96% of what you earn. 4% taxes, and you can live your life however you want. And when people heard this, they said, that sounds so great. I want to live there. And they did come here in droves, precisely because of the freedom that our state offered them. And when they came here, they put the motto of our state on our flag. Our liberties we prize, and our rights we will maintain. To remind us, the citizens of Iowa, that that's why they came here. Well, that's exactly the sort of Iowa that Nick and I want to eventually restore to the state. Okay, I'd like to introduce a couple of other people before we answer questions. First, Jacob is the head of our election committee. This is Jacob Saltzman. Wave to the folks, Jacob. He's recording today, so I won't have him stand up. And he's a student at Iowa State, and he's also doing our signature collecting. And then Jake Porter, if he'd come up here. Jake just recently joined our team. Jake just joined it last week. He's going to be our campaign manager. And for somebody Jake's age, he has probably the most impressive libertarian resume in the United States, I would say. Jake was the campaign manager for George Phillies last year, or in 2008, when he tried to get the Libertarian presidential nomination. He was also the Iowa campaign manager for Bob Barr's presidential campaign, the Libertarian candidate, in 2008. And then he is on the Libertarian National Committee. So somebody